Well, ladies and gentlemen, we finally come to it. Superman at the box office. And how is it doing? Well, domestically, it came in at $122 million. Now, the good news about that is it managed to avoid the most disastrous projections, which were saying that it might only do $90 million. And while it isn't getting the same heights as the Batman at like $131 million, and the projections that it would get $175 million were complete bogus from the beginning, 122 under all the circumstances for a domestic opening, considering the superhero fatigue and the brand damage to DC movies and just how low the box office in general has been since COVID. That is a good start domestically. However, Superman is not doing well internationally at all. International numbers ideally should come out larger than domestic numbers because you're counting all the countries apart from America towards the box office. But it usually is higher. But this time, the international numbers all put together for Superman didn't even hit 100 million. It's only 95 million at the box office at best for current projections. So that is a problem that has happened with a lot of superhero films. They do really well domestically on the first weekend, but they collapse when it comes to legs and internationally. Now, one of those things have happened is that it looks like it's collapsing internationally. The domestic box office is going to have to carry a lot. There are still a lot of questions around this film. It doesn't look like it's going to get to 700 million. It might not even be profitable considering all that was put in with the film with the production budget and the marketing. But WB might not need it to be. They were saying a couple of days ago that they would just want it to be $500 million at the box office for them to consider it successful, which that would not be profitable at all. But right now, I bet the reason why they said that is because that is where a lot of people are thinking that it might come in the $500 million range when it ends its box office run. So we'll see about that. And while it might not be profitable, I do see this as the people at WB talking about whether or not they will continue with this universe, because it did get an A- cinema score. A- cinema score is not great for a action superhero movie. That was the same as what Man of Steel got, but also the same as the Batman got. It means that audiences did not dislike the film, but there were problems with it, you know? But it has an 82% on Rotten Tomatoes, but I hope that they look past that Rotten Tomatoes score and to a lot of the criticisms that this film is getting. Because right now it is up in the air. Like the big thing is going to be next week. How good are the domestic numbers going to be continuing into the next week? Can this film do enough to be considered just an uptick for the DC universe to get an entire new universe and build from here and get many more films and just grow the audience and the box office from there? Like, that's the big thing, is I can see WB not caring if they don't get 700 million on the first film, as long as the trajectory is in the right direction and they can build on it. Well, if they decide to build upon this universe, that will be a great shame, because Superman turned out to be a disastrous movie. Listen, guys, in a way, I am glad that the box office for the domestic is performing the way it is, that we finally have more movies that are coming out that are doing the over $100 million mark. But I am tired of saying the same thing that I have said all year. Well, at least it'll help the theaters. Horrible film, but at least it'll help the theaters. Because you know what? There's some other films that did really well this year. Lilo and Stitch, Minecraft, Jurassic World Rebirth. All of these films, just absolutely terrible films that people are going to see regardless of if they're terrible or not, or because it's a distraction. It's a lot of noise on the screen. That's what these films are, but they don't hold up to an ounce of scrutiny. If Superman legs out at all, I think that will be the reason, is that unlike Zack Snyder films were boring to mainstream audiences. They really relied on a lot of slow motion. James Gunn's Superman is so much noise that maybe enough people will be distracted by that so that they won't think about how the plot doesn't make any sense and the characterization and the development is actually quite shallow. I would refer to what movies have become these days as a Godzilla vs. Kong analogy. The Godzilla x Kong vs. Kong, or whatever you want to call it, movies are really bad. Really bad. They feign having characterization. They feign having any sort of plot. The real point of those movies is just an excuse to watch dinosaurs fight each other and make a lot of noise, or monsters in this case. And that's why people go to see the Jurassic World movies. But I feel like that's becoming every film, like Minecraft or now Superman. I feel like that is the exact analogy of what Superman is. A movie that maybe people see because it's loud and bombastic enough that it's a distraction for 2 hours. But there's no substance to it. There's no quality to it at all. And it's the kind of movie that I know is gonna fall apart within months' time. There were so many things about this movie that I wasn't even able to cover in my review. Like, I didn't even touch on the Jor-El character assassination that seems like they're committing to that for now. My question with Superman, though, with all the flaws of the movie, is just focusing on one thing. My question is not, can you make an interconnected universe out of this? But how do you make an interconnected universe out of this? Let's take Lex Luthor, for example. He is such a shallow, one-dimensional cartoon character in this movie, where his entire motivation does not make sense. He lives in a world where metahumans have existed for 300 years, yet he's chosen to be jealous of Superman, particularly because he says Superman makes him feel small. In this world of metahumans, where Superman is not even portrayed to be the most powerful of them, it makes no sense. His plan is completely cartoonish in the movie. He's very, very stupid, actually, with how he gets defeated. And the only way to accept it all is if you just accept that this is a complete cartoon universe where everything is one-dimensional and nothing is to be taken seriously. But with that, like, how do you go, like, there's no depth to the characters. So, like, for example, with Lex Luthor, how do you go in a sequel and add depth to him with this, or any of the other characters? How do you do a sequel or another movie set in a different part of this universe that maybe takes itself a bit more seriously? The problem is everything is so heightened and so cartoonish and so ridiculously stupid in the Superman movie that it does not lend itself to any other kind of storytelling in an interconnected universe. A Batman taking itself more seriously could not exist in this universe. Matt Reeves' Batman could not exist. And the way that Gunn has chosen to portray these characters as these 1 to 2 dimensional cartoons does not lend itself to giving any more depth in a follow-up film, which is what I really wanted to see. So with this sort of style that James Gunn has gone in, it's like he's trapped himself where there's not anything else that he can do in this universe and it make a lot of sense. And what do we have to really follow up on this movie? A Supergirl film, which I guarantee whatever Superman does, it will do well under half of that. But at least it's a spin-off to Superman. But after that, we have a Clayface film, an R-rated Clayface film, before we even get another Batman film. And that is how James Gunn is rounding out his universe? Like, this does not make any cohesive sense. And I don't even know if I understand the particular world that we're in right now. With other movies that you're coming into a new universe, like Iron Man or Star Wars: A New Hope, they will give you a surrogate character to introduce yourself into this universe. Like, Luke is obviously living in the Star Wars universe, but he's a very isolated character who is just being introduced to the greater universe. So we get to follow him and be introduced to everything that the universe holds. Tony Stark is the same way. He's in an up and running Marvel universe, but it was at a time in that universe, in the context that there weren't supposed to be consistently a lot of characters with powers and fantastical things happening. It was part of a shift going on in that world. So as we follow Tony Stark going in being introduced to that shift and being introduced to things greater than him, we are also introduced to that universe. But that is not what we have with Superman. We are hitting the ground running with no surrogate character to introduce us to this world, and just a movie that barrages us with constant things already running, characters we don't recognize, a world where Lex Luthor can make pocket dimensions and metahumans have existed for 300 years, and there's a Justice Gang, and there's all this kind of stuff happening, and when it just happens so fast that I don't feel like I know this universe, and I don't feel like it's a great place to start for building upon it when I feel like it already handed us kind of a mess. With a lot of the criticisms with the Superman film, though, there are Superman fans that are acknowledging them. Things like Jor-El's character assassination, and say, hey, wait, they can fix these things in an upcoming film. But I gotta say, I'm getting flashbacks because that is exactly the excuses that people use for films like Man of Steel and Force Awakens. And we saw how that turned out. You should not be coming out of a film trying to defend it and excuse it as these things, all these flaws that people see can be fixed in a future film, because the film needs to stand on its own. As we've seen, a film needs to be good on its own. It cannot be called good if you are constantly having to defend it by these things could be fixed in a future installment. I feel like I'm on a loop, like we're right back to where we started with Man of Steel, where the movie was not good, but everyone insists that it will get better as we go forward. But once again, I just don't really see how you build on any of this stuff. And what is very, very key is that James Gunn is now the Kevin Feige of DC. And as I saw with what we saw of Supergirl in the movie being a drunkard girl who parties, all of the characters, even if James Gunn hires other directors as he has done for Supergirl, like they're just carrying out his vision for the characters. It's all James Gunn stuff. It's James Gunn's universe, so he doesn't really have interest in Superman. So Superman is going to get the shaft for a majority of the film so he can focus on the Justice Gang and a lot of quirky characters that he likes to use. Supergirl, she's going to be based off of a James Gunn story that he likes by Tom King, where she is a swearing drunkard party girl, because that's not what Supergirl is in the large majority of adaptations and content, but that's what she's going to be because that adds up with James Gunn's taste. My point is here, it is all James Gunn's taste, but he has a very narrow taste and one that is not going to be able to handle all of the diverse characters of the DC universe. Batman is the scariest one to think that this guy could handle, because Batman and his entire universe is something that 100% doesn't add up with any of James Gunn's taste. Interestingly enough, James Gunn said that Batman is the hardest character to crack right now for him. What? Are you kidding me? Batman has been the easiest character to crack for all of DC for decades at that point. There's nothing about him that got caught up in what do we need to do to modernize him and change him. He's a relatable character, and they've done so much successful content with him and had so many good stories that haven't even been told yet, even though James Gunn seems to think they've all been told, which is not true. Batman should be the easiest character to do, but I bet it's harder for James Gunn because this character does not add up with his taste, and I just don't want to imagine how James Gunn is going to handle that universe. And by the way, James Gunn was emphasizing so much on the importance of scripts and importance to get the script done, but then the first movie he does, the biggest problem with it is just how bloated and messy and nonsensical the script is. So if Supergirl and Clayface are up to his standards on scripts, how good do you think those films are gonna be? Are we really gonna get like a 10-year universe off of this mess that James Gunn has turned in? And is he really going to continue to be the architect of all of this when he turned in a Superman movie this bad, all because it maybe has a higher score on Rotten Tomatoes for some reason, or because the Superman fanboys are just eating it up and praising it as much as Star Wars fans did for The Force Awakens? Are we really plagued with the wrong guy with the wrong, most narrow taste working on all of these DC characters when he's proven that he is quite inflexible with this kind of stuff? He needs everything to become his own comedic dude bro style of humor, which is the fundamental problem of why he didn't establish a universe here. Everything needed to be a joke, and so that's how we got this heightened, overly comedic universe that doesn't lend itself to anyone else. We will see what happens in the coming weeks domestically. I could either see this being, once again, a Godzilla vs. Kong situation where people go see the movie, at least domestically, as a distraction, and that gets it enough to continue on going forward with a universe. Heaven help us. But on the other side, I can see that this dropping a lot because it is not a film that holds up to any sort of even a pin drop of scrutiny, and I think that people are going to see that. But the reason why I think that so many people are eager to praise this film and eager to see what they want to see in this film, guys, this is an obviously bad film. It's obviously a mess, but I think a lot of people just want to see what they want to see from it. It didn't matter what kind of film James Gunn made. This is the same thing that happened with Man of Steel. People needed to see the best thing out of it because it had to be good, and they had to be able to keep up Superman as a character in this universe. But guys, it isn't bad to want more from superhero films. So there's people on board of these films like this and Thunderbolts that are just praising them to high heaven because I don't know, honestly. Thunderbolts because it was just mediocre and not a complete disaster, or this movie because I don't know, it wasn't Zack Snyder. Guys, let me tell you why I got into superhero films. Because at the time when I was growing up, they were coming out with films like Batman Begins and The Dark Knight and Iron Man. And with these films, what we were starting to see from superhero characters that we hadn't seen in, say, the 70s and 80s, all due respect to those films, is that those films did not have a lot of depth to them. The characters were very one-to-dimensional. But when it came to the films coming out in the late 2000s and the 2010s, superhero movies started to have a lot of depth. They started to be taken a lot more seriously, not as overly serious movies, but as three-dimensional characters. Like, looking back at the films that we used to get when superhero movies were in their heyday, I am shocked. I'm shocked looking back now that a film like Logan was ever allowed to be released. A visceral experience and a film that was a character study with true depth to it. We were getting psychological thrillers like The Dark Knight. We were getting movies that were incredibly character-driven like Iron Man and the Avengers films, which when done right were very character-driven. It truly was the quality of these films that garnered that much success and made people attached to these characters and made them want to watch every movie, even though not every movie would be great. There was a lot of mediocre stuff, but when the next project you watch could be the first season of Daredevil on Netflix, yeah, that got people attached to want to see more and more of this stuff. But now superhero content has regressed and devolved back into the eras where it was all shallow noise. Captain America, Brave New World, and Superman are just shallow noise, even though, yes, Superman is better than Captain America, Brave New World. When you look back at films that you used to get, Into the Spider-Verse, when you look back at films that you used to get for superhero movies, I understand completely why they were successful. I remember why these characters and stories were so meaningful and even formative to me, and I think, yeah, they 100% deserved that success, and I would like to one day be able to see that again. I would like to one day be able to see three-dimensional superhero characters with real depth on the big screen again, and writing that is not overly rushed but is tight, and plots that actually hold up to scrutiny. Movies that, unlike this Superman movie, are actually able to slow down and allow you to get to know these characters and their relationships and the chemistry between them and how they relate, rather than just trying to constantly bombard you with comedy so that you won't notice the fact that you're watching a bad movie with a convoluted plot. It's no wonder that younger people are not gravitating towards superhero movies like they used to. It's mostly people just ginned up on nostalgia because they're not creating superhero movies on the quality that they used to. And I don't think it's bad to ask for that kind of quality again and ask for them to try to achieve that level of quality again if they ever want to get that audience back, because the suits in Hollywood do not care about quality. Obviously, they care about money. They only care about finding out what quality is, whatever that is to them, whatever, and they have a hard time figuring that out if it means profitability and money. If this is what people say that they just want from Superman and superhero movies, then this is what they are going to get. And that is the danger of just blindly approving of something just because it's a part of a character and a universe that you have an emotional attachment to and that you want to see do well. If you accept less, then you're going to get less in the future. And that's a real shame. If this movie, if this Superman that is as bad as it is the foundation of another DC universe, another potential 10 years of floundering and not using these characters properly and not even giving them good writing, which is exactly the same area that they were in before, and it's eventually going to catch up to them financially as well. I want movies to do well at theaters, but I would rather that good movies do well at theaters. That's why it would be a better option if Superman does not overperform or perform very well, so that they learn to steer away from this direction. They need to do better than these kinds of scripts. They can't have someone like James Gunn running every single thing. Hopefully someday, we will have creators that understood what made superhero movies so popular in the 2010s and that level of quality, and maybe one day find their way back to it. But maybe they won't. Maybe that era of time was just a pocket in the universe and there's no way to get back to that. But I'm still not going to be fooled and delusional and think that these movies are better than that or in any way acceptable, or that I'm just blinded by nostalgia and I think that everything before was better. No, it was better. So my standards, whether you guys like it or not, are not going to be lowered just out of desperation. But that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to my spiel on this. I hope that you'll all consider my words and consider not accepting less for these characters that have so much potential. Once again, thank you all for watching. Thank you patrons and members as always for supporting me. If you want to support me, you can consider becoming a patron or a member yourself. And I will see you guys next time.